Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a short bill. It is less than 7 standard pages in length. You could read out the entire text in the time allotted to a single speech in this House. But the contrast it draws between the Liberal National Coalition and the Labor Party opposite is far greater. Each of its brief pages is another ringing indictment of the Labor Party's total failure in government's most important responsibility, and that, of course, is to keep Australians safe. The bill before us highlights the inescapable fact that the Liberal National Coalition has the principles, the strength and the willingness to do what's necessary to protect our borders and to keep Australians safe. Time and time again we've seen the mettle of the Labor Party tested in this place, and the people of Australia have found that they have been left wanting. Labor does not have the stomach to protect our borders. They do not have the fortitude to deal with those who would have come here illegally or those who break our laws when they arrive. Labor cannot keep Australians safe. As a party, they lack the character to make the tough decisions needed, and in the debates in this bill, they have been found wanting yet again. Migration has contributed a huge amount to our country, Madam Deputy Speaker, but coming to live in Australia is a privilege, not a right, for those who are born overseas. The great Liberal Prime Minister John Howard famously and rightly said that we will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come. Those words are as true today as they were 18 years ago. However, we must also apply the same principle to those that we permit to stay here. If people come to our country to work hard, to contribute and to help us build our nation, then Australians welcome and embrace them. But if someone that we've granted the privilege to come to this country chooses to commit serious criminal offences, to commit acts of violence or sexual assault, our community rightly demands that their government protects them. Australians expect that those people will be considered for removal, and this coalition government is acting to meet that expectation. As the law stands, a non-citizen must be sentenced to a minimum of 12 months imprisonment in order to be considered for cancellation or refusal of a visa on the basis of their character. This provision in the 1958 Migration Act is designed to ensure that only serious offences are taken into account. However, in this regard, in the world of 2019, it fails to meet community expectations. The criminal justice system today deploys a variety of techniques to punish and rehabilitate offenders. A 12-month jail term in and of itself is no longer the best marker of a serious offence. My constituents in the electorate of Fisher, like all Australians, would consider violent assault to be a serious offence. Sexual offences, offences involving a weapon, aggravated burglary and kidnapping are crimes which our community rightly understands to be serious. Yet with fines, good behaviour bonds, intensive correction orders and youth supervision orders, all of these are crimes which in 2019 may not always attract a 12-month prison sentence. This bill will ensure that my constituents and those around Australia that their expectations will be met, and that if you choose to commit a crime of this nature, then the department will have the power to cancel or refuse you a visa for this country. It does this by changing the character test to specifically list types of offences which will constitute grounds for considering cancelling or refusing a visa. The types of activity we're discussing are crimes of the most serious kind: violence against a person, including murder, manslaughter, kidnapping, assault, aggravated burglary, threatening violence, non-consensual sexual conduct and using or possessing a weapon. This new approach includes appropriate protections for migrants. In making their decision to refuse or cancel a visa, the Department would be required to take into account the nature and extent of the person's ties to Australia and our international obligations. However, just as importantly, it would require the Department to consider the impact on victims. It would require them to consider the best interests of children in Australia, the expectations of our community, and the protection of our people from criminal conduct. I'm certain that the people of my electorate, like most Australians, will see nothing but benefits to our community in this bill's 7 concise pages. So the question, Deputy Speaker, is what will members opposite do? Will Labor members vote against the bill before the House? If they do, I hope that every Australian will hear that fact and take the time to understand what it means and what they stand for. It will mean that Labor want to allow a temporary visa holder in Australia who's been convicted of a violent assault not only to stay in this country but to apply for a permanent visa. It will mean that Labor want to allow a sex offender in immigration detention to remain eligible for a temporary visa to this country. It will mean that they want a young permanent resident involved in violent gang crime to remain part of our community indefinitely. These are not invented cases, Deputy Speaker, but real-life examples. They are the truth of what is happening in this country without this bill. This is what Labor would be voting to allow. Which assaults do Labor think a foreign resident in Australia should be permitted to commit without being removed? What weapons should they be allowed to carry? Which aggravated burglaries or sexual assaults do Labor believe should not disqualify a person from continuing to live among us? The reality is that to commit a crime of that nature is to utterly reject Australian values and the hospitality of our people.
Member for Bruce.
In committing these crimes, these individuals have told us that they have no interest in being a contributing part of our community. No one who wasn't blinded by fanatical ideology could possibly want to keep them here after such a violent and fundamental rejection of our very way of life. And yet, that is what the Labor Party want to see, Deputy Speaker. By opposing this bill, they are opposing even giving the Department the option to consider removing these individuals from our community. Too weak on border protection themselves to ever exercise such an option, they want to deny it to Liberal national ministers with the backbone required. Labor's opposition to this bill is saddening, even shocking, but I doubt many Australians would be surprised by it. Because earlier this year, Australians saw clearly, once again, what will happen to our migration system if Labor are ever given the chance to govern. Earlier this year, our constituents saw that Labor never change and they never learn. When the opportunity arose at the end of the last parliament to take a lead in passing legislation in this place, the first thing they did with that opportunity was to weaken our borders and invite criminals and economic migrants to try their luck with us once again. If Labor ever have the chance to govern, there is no doubt they will go even further. How many more boats will it take for Labor to finally wake up? How many more deaths at sea? How many more crimes committed by those that we have granted the privilege to come to our country? 800 boats and 50,000 people were not enough for Labor to do the right thing on border security. 1,200 deaths at sea were not enough. 8,000 children in detention couldn't strengthen their resolve. That is their track record. I fear for our future should they ever form government again. When will Labor find the backbone to stand up to their armchair metropolitan ideologues in their party and put Australia's interests ahead of their own political convenience? This side of the House has shown them the way. The Liberal National Coalition created Operation Sovereign Borders. For more than 6 years, we've presided over its complete success. We have stopped the boats. We have stopped the deaths at sea. We've removed the children that Labor, that's a big statement to come from you, put in immigration detention. We've reduced the numbers of adults on Manus and Nauru from Labor's peak of 20,000 to fewer than 1,000 remaining. Yet Labor still cannot see it, and they still want to argue the point. They still vote against our border protection measures. When given the chance, still they legislate to undermine and dismantle Operation Sovereign Borders. Members opposite know the facts. In fact, the main interjector on that side of the House was the shadow responsible for Labor's policies at the time. They've seen what works. Labor has seen what works, and they know what happened when they were last in government. The simple reality is that they either don't care or they are bound by their green friends. Labor are more interested in satisfying the left-wing and green activists in their own ranks than they are in keeping Australians safe. Labor would rather protect themselves than protect our borders. It's as simple as that. Deputy Speaker, the Liberal National Coalition knows what it takes to keep Australians safe. With this bill, we are demonstrating that yet again. We need to send a message to those who would abuse our community's hospitality and reject our way of life. Whether they attract a 12-month prison sentence or not, violent crimes, sexual assault, carrying weapons or threatening to harm another person are not behaviour that Australians will tolerate. You cannot expect to come to Australia or to stay here if those are the choices that you intend to make. We need to give our government the power to reject those migrants who have rejected our way of life. Where the opportunity exists, we need to protect our citizens from individuals who would otherwise do us harm. Australians expect us to keep them safe. That is our duty, and it is a duty the Liberal National Coalition resolutely and steadfastly embraces. That is what this bill is about, and I commend it to the House.